Good morning, everyone. And I mean this sincerely. This is a good morning. I'm Sal Roselli, President Emeritus of the National Union of Healthcare Workers. It's my honor to welcome all of you that are in this room and those that are tuning in to the NUHW Governor Candidate Forum. This morning, we're raising the curtain on the race for governor of California. In a few minutes, we will hear from declared candidates campaigning for the state's highest office who will be on the ballot in 2026. Over the next 90 minutes, we will get to know these remarkable people a little better, and we will get a better sense of their policy positions. All four of them are longtime friends of our union and have received endorsements for offices that they've been running in since they've gotten into politics. Let me also say a few words about the audience in the National Union of Healthcare Workers. NUHW represents 19,000 California healthcare workers in hospitals, clinics, nursing homes, and patients' own homes, from the Mexican border all the way up to the Oregon border. Our members are a cross-section of California's diverse population and workforce, including psychologists, pharmacists, nurses, nursing assistants, clerical workers, janitors, technicians, social workers, and many others. In this room, there are more than 300 NUHW leaders who have traveled here from across the state. In addition to those in our audience in San Francisco this morning, many of our members are watching this live stream. I also want to welcome all of those across California who are not our members, who are viewing this exercise in democracy on the LA Times website. And my thanks to the Los Angeles Times for agreeing to be our media partner for this event. And we all welcome the viewers on CPAN who are tuning into this event. You should know that this is not the first forum that NUHW has sponsored. 6 years ago, we hosted similar forum in the race for governor back then that Gavin Newsom eventually won. And again last fall, we sponsored a forum with the Democratic candidates in the 2024 US Senate race. At that forum, we had an incredible journalist from the Associated Press to serve as the moderator. That's Lisa Matthews. Despite this being a very busy year for someone who serves as AP's national planning editor, Lisa has agreed to come back and again serve as the moderator this year. I'm thrilled, we're thrilled that she's here with us. Let me turn this stage over to her. Let's give a round of applause for Lisa Matthews.
All righty. Thank you, Sal. Hey, California. Thank you so much, and welcome everyone to the 2024 NUHW Governor Candidate Forum. This event is brought to you by the National Union of Healthcare Workers in conjunction with media partner, the Los Angeles Times. Yeah. As Sal said, I will be moderating this discussion and asking questions on behalf of the Associated Press. Working alongside me for approximately the next 90 minutes, which is gonna fly, okay, will be two esteemed journalists experienced at covering state and national issues, including healthcare, California politics, as well as labor and issues related to taxes and spending. They'll be asking the key questions. So let's begin by welcoming them to the stage. First, Melanie Mason, who covers California politics for Politico. Melanie? Awesome. Next, we have Laurel Rosenhall, California politics editor for the Los Angeles Times. Laurel. indeedy. And I thank these journalists and the news organizations for whom they work for agreeing to take part in this civic exercise. We're grateful to have you guys here this morning. Now, let me give you a few additional details about the program we're about to engage in. And I appreciate audience participation, so bring it on, right? As moderator, I'm here to preserve the integrity of this forum. More simply, it's my job to ensure that the questions asked of each candidate by our panelists or myself actually get heard and get answered, okay? I want to stress that this is a forum and not a debate. Questions asked by the candidates of the candidates should be addressed to the questioner, okay, and not directed at each other. The audience gathered here today in the room and those viewing online want answers. We have limited time, and I'm going to be a human guardrail to ensure that we don't get sidetracked by tangents or personal attacks or long speeches, yada, 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 okay? During this forum, we will go through several rounds of questions. Our panelists will take turns directing a single question to each candidate, who will then be asked to answer with a 1 minute or less response. After each of the 4 candidates answer, the journalists on the panel are guaranteed 1 follow-up question per round. I also may ask a question myself because, I'm running this. Yeah. Some rounds of questions will deal with a specific topic area. The last round will cover a grab bag of issues, and we're going to have lots of fun with that. In that round, our panelists may or may not direct the same question to each candidate. Alrighty? Our timekeeper will make sure no one exceeds the allotted time. A bell that sounds like this, yes, will let candidates know that they are out of time and must yield the floor. Okay, are you ready? Okay. All righty, good. I just want to stress that the order for opening and closing statements was predetermined before we started. So let's get the candidates out here. Let's welcome them to the stage, the top announced Democratic candidates for California governor in the 2026 gubernatorial election. Toni Atkins. Eleni Kounalakis. Toni Thurmond. And last but not least, Betty Yee. Okay, let's get to it. Now we're going to hear opening statements from the candidates, with each speaking for 1 minute. We will begin with Betty Yee.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. And thank you to NUHW members all throughout the state, and really to our panelists for the opportunity for me to share information about me with the hope of earning your support for my candidacy for governor. California is in need of a strong, decisive leader and who can bring parties together and reach consensus among diverse communities and interests, and at the same time, move our great state forward. This type of leadership requires experience, and I bring decades of experience in public service doing exactly that. My service on the Board of Equalization, as your former state controller, and even now as serving as vice chair of the California Democratic Party, should demonstrate that I'm able to provide this leadership, bringing interests that have different points of view and approaches to solutions, and bringing consensus so that we are improving the lives of Californians. This is what I will be bringing to the governor's office. And for NUHW, I know your concerns. We have been on the front lines together, and we will continue to be sure that we are uplifting our healthcare workforce, that we are looking at how we will be resolving the mental health crisis that California is facing, and at the same time, continue to be the model and the beacon for the rest of the nation in terms of how we take care of ourselves.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's remember to stick to 1 minute, please. 1 minute. Eleni Kounalakis.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, NUHW. What an honor to be here. Sal, Sophia, thank you. Thank you for last night. That beautiful tribute to you, Sal. I'm Eleni Kounalakis. I'm the Lieutenant Governor of California. I'm the daughter of an immigrant who started out as a farm worker and a waiter in the governor's mansion. In my life, I've had 3 careers. I started out for 20 years working in housing and delivering master-planned housing communities in the Sacramento region. I was then tapped by President Obama to serve in his administration as a diplomat, fighting for democracy. And 6 years ago, with the support of NUHW, I was honored to be elected Lieutenant Governor. In this role, I am fighting for women, I am fighting for workers, I am fighting for students, and I am fighting for an economy that works better for everyone, because I believe that every young Californian should have the same opportunities that my father had, and I hope to earn your support today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, Toni Thurmond.
Good morning and buenos dias. It is my honor to serve you as the state superintendent of our 1,000 school districts in the great state of California. Our state is at a crossroads. We already have systems that work for billionaires and millionaires. We need a governor who will fight for working people and for the middle class. And I, as a social worker who spent 20 years working with foster youth and school-based mental health, and for those who have developmental disabilities, have parlayed all of my experience to bring forth a vision to build affordable housing, to provide housing for the homeless, and to make sure that people have good-paying jobs where they don't have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. I know what it's like to overcome humble beginnings. Before you is the descendant of slaves and immigrants from Panama and Colombia and Detroit, Michigan, who've been working hard for people like you, and I've used education to parlay my experience to help the 40 million people of our state.
Thank you for your remarks. Okay, finally, Toni Atkins.
Well, thank you. Good morning, NUHW. It is great to be with you here this morning. I want to start by thanking you for the work that you do keeping Californians healthy, especially your heroism during the pandemic. As a Kaiser patient myself, I count on each and every one of you. And it's important to me that you are treated with the respect that you deserve as professional healthcare workers. I grew up without healthcare. My dad was a lead miner. My mom was a garment worker. They worked incredibly hard and died way too young, mostly because they didn't have access to quality healthcare. I believe that healthcare should be a right. And that's why I was the co-author to SB 562. My life experience informs the work that I do on healthcare, on reproductive rights, on housing, education, workers' rights, climate, and so much more. I look forward to your questions and sharing more of my vision, my history, and why I should serve as your next governor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Toni Atkins. Okay, now let's not forget that bell. Okay, let's not forget that bell. We want to keep folks on the game here for the 1 minute. All righty, so let's move on to the first round of questions from our panel of journalists. Remember, each candidate gets 1 minute to answer, controlled by the clock and the bell. For the first round, let's focus on healthcare. Melanie of Politico, you get the first crack.
Thank you, Lisa. The California legislature has tried and failed multiple times to advance measures seeking to establish a universal single-payer healthcare system for all residents in the state. If elected, would you commit to the single-payer system in California, and how do you propose we pay for such a plan? Would that require raising taxes? Former Controller Gee, why don't we start with you?
Thank you very much. First, let me just thank NUHW for being a primary sponsor of Senate Bill 770, which now has our Secretary of Health and Human Resources Agency preparing the medical services framework for how we will inform a unified financing healthcare system. This work will continue into next year, but I support the implementation of SB 770, and I also support the implementation of a unified financing system that actually will make meaningful change in terms of access to healthcare, being sure that we are improving services to our underserved communities, and also hopefully bringing meaningful savings. We have the Healthcare Commission for All here in California that has purported that it will save billions of dollars with respect to administration and also result in less deaths per year because of increased access. So I will campaign for a unified financing system if it does not hamper the access to services, curb any tax increases for working people and our middle class, and brings meaningful improvement.
Thank you. Superintendent Thurmond.
Yeah, I believe that healthcare is a human right, and I support a single-payer system because it's the right thing to do, and because when my 35-year-old brother lost his job and lost his health insurance and developed a serious illness, he lost his life because he couldn't see a doctor because he didn't have insurance. It is time that we truly put patients over the profits that healthcare companies seek to gain every single day. We don't have single payer in this state and in this country because people haven't had the political will to bring it forward. I've voted for single payer as a legislator, and I've campaigned for single payer, and I will respect what has come out of SB 770 to build the coalition to create it. We have every single model to show us how to create it. And the savings that we will generate could be upwards of $150 million, $150 billion, would allow us to create a system where no one goes without care. And as governor, I will be proud to implement a single payer system.
Lieutenant Governor Kounalakis.
Thank you. So when I served in the Obama administration, we fought hard for the public option, and Obamacare has been amazing. But as I've traveled the state of California, what I've seen is more people than ever have insurance and fewer people than ever have access to care. So I do support 770. I do support the single-payer system and unified financing, and I am sure that when we get into this, we are going to find that the out-of-control profiteering that you all see every day and the huge bloated management and red tape, that when we put that aside and focus on delivering care, a single-payer system can work. And I just want to say to all of you, because the last night and this morning, when you talk about your contract negotiations and you talk about the need to get paid more and have better staffing, I hear you always talking about it in the context of your patients and how much you care for them. And I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Senator Atkins.
Thank you. Well, the short answer is yes. If I didn't believe in it, I wouldn't have co-authored 562 a number of years ago. But as NUHW knows, you can't make that system happen overnight. So, of course, I support SB 770 that we push through the legislature to create that framework that will come back to us. And I look forward to that report in January of 2025 that talks to us about how to move forward in the steps to a unified financed healthcare system. I would say that we need to get, and it also is going to provide the waiver options of how we approach the federal government, because we are going to need the resources that go into Medi-Cal, Medicare, Medicaid to be able to finance a system here in our state. I think I've shown my commitment to single payer. Now we need to see it through. I hope you've had a chance to look at what's publicly out there as a result of 770 that you sponsored, and you can see what other states are doing and what the country is doing to move in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. You all spoke about SB 770, and I think that speaks to a key point about the single-payer debate. If California has any chance to institute a single-payer program, it will need the approval of the federal government. And as you mentioned, California is now in the process of having that conversation of how to seek such approval. But as a follow-up, I'd like to ask Senator Atkins, how will you work as governor to ensure that the federal government is on board, particularly if former President Trump is reelected to the White House?
Well, I think we continue to fight for what we need. And I think access to health care, as I said earlier, is a basic human right. Look, I spent 4 years with Trump in the presidency, and as California, we had to hold the line So I will say this, the federal government has been looking at this option. Other states, Oregon and Washington, have passed legislation to support single payer. We will continue to do the work on the ground, and I will fight like hell to make sure that California gets to put our values first, which is to support a unified single-payer healthcare system. We are doing the work to get there. We will do the work we need to do to fight to protect California values.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. It's a great first round. Laurel from the Los Angeles Times, it's your turn. Take it.
Thank you. California has been expanding the number of people who can get health insurance through Medi-Cal, but it can be difficult for them to get appointments to see a doctor. Many healthcare providers say part of the problem is that the state doesn't reimburse them enough to treat Medi-Cal patients. They're supporting Proposition 35 to raise the reimbursement rate. But Governor Newsom has criticized Prop 35 as ballot box budgeting that will make it harder for the state to balance its books. Which side are you on? Let's start with the superintendent, please.
I support Prop 35 because I'm someone who's had to work with Medi-Cal to provide mental health services to false use and to families throughout our state. I know that is a federal entitlement. That means if you are eligible for Medi-Cal, then you should be able to receive great mental health services, but low rates threaten the usability of Medi-Cal for many in our communities. And that's why I've worked on programs to help provide more nurses and doctors in various parts of our state, and we must continue to work to improve Medi-Cal rates. I've voted to pass a tax on managed care organizations in this state because they have enough money that they can support what we do, and supporting Prop 35 means that we will get more support from the federal government for Medi-Cal and to improve rates for low-income Californians to have access to great care and great mental health care.
Lieutenant Governor.
So I support more money for the reimbursements rates. We are having a major problem. The governor has said that this can be handled through the budgeting process, and he's asking for more flexibility. So what this really draws to is the fact that there is so much profiteering going on and so much waste in this system that the right things are not being funded. And that is why we need radical change and radical reform to our healthcare system in order to be able to make the numbers work. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to have these kinds of challenges. I have been to 58 counties of California, and I go back and I spend time in the Central Valley, and I hear the same thing. It is real. People have insurance. They can't see a doctor. Hospitals are closing. Clinics are overwhelmed. We have to have higher reimbursement rates, but the formula isn't working right now.
So you're a no on 35?
I'm staying neutral on this issue. I think the people should decide.
Okay. Senator Atkins?
I support Proposition 35. I voted more than once on the MCO tax, the Managed Care Organization tax, so that we could fund health care. Look, we have the Affordable Care Act implemented. A third of our residents are on Medi-Cal in this state. You don't have access if you don't have the ability to see a doctor because the reimbursement rates are too low to pay for that care. Prop 35 will put money into hospitals, into clinics, into increasing the reimbursement rate. And look, I think taxpayers want to see that the money for whatever fee or tax on managed health care goes for the exact service that it's supposed to. And so I do support it. It forces us to live within those means and not always do drastic cuts to healthcare, which we've done before we were able to do the rainy day fund and have a healthcare reserve. So I support Prop 35, and I think it will make our system overall better until we expand healthcare truly for everyone in this state.
Okay. And Betty Yee?
I support the managed healthcare tax, but I will say that Prop 35 is something that was negotiated as a remedy that I don't believe received enough sunshine. You know, we are looking to increase access for all Californians. We still have about 2.5 million Californians who are not covered by health insurance and lack access to care. I think we need a more comprehensive look at how we are going to increase that access, and definitely support this tax, definitely support increasing provider rates and being sure that we are expanding access. However, we also know the federal government still needs to approve and continually review this tax, and there may be some unintended consequences to where the federal government may actually be offsetting some other federal funding we're getting for healthcare. So the devil's in the details, and I never want to shoot ourselves in the foot without sunshining a lot more of what we're actually getting as benefits and whether we're really making real improvements, because this may cost all of us here as working people in the long run if we're not careful about understanding what we're getting.
So you're a no?
I'm a no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's a great round. Fantastic. You know, before we turn away from healthcare, I want to talk about mental health. You know, that's really, really important. And from what I understand, California's Department of Managed Healthcare is basically charged with protecting consumers' rights, basically all of their healthcare rights, which includes mental health. But there are patients that are still facing really long waits for initial care and for follow-ups. And then some of that time is like major time waiting for resolution. And I'm curious, as governor, what you would do to ensure that state regulators hold health plans accountable for their violations of mental health parity and timely access in particular, and how you propose to change the framework of oversight in that area. And I'd like to begin with Atkins.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Well, you mentioned one component of what Department of Managed Healthcare does. The second is to ensure a stable healthcare delivery system, which obviously we have not been able to do. I don't think you can do one at the expense of the other. Among the rights should be timely access, and that's why a sponsored bill by NUHW, SB 221, that I voted for, championed, and pushed through the legislature is really important. And I think as governor, I would start by simply making sure that the law that I voted on, SB 221, is upheld. I voted on and pushed it through. It needs to be enforced. I also, secondly, would tell you that my appointments to these department heads would reflect your values, not those of an HMO. I will always put Californians' rights above any health insurance company and make sure that there's no imbalance. That's what we're seeing between protecting consumers and ensuring a stable healthcare system.
Thank you. Kounalakis.
Well, I think Toni is exactly right. You all fought hard for 221 because you care about your patients. It is because of the mental health parity work that you have done that patients who seek aid in mental health get an appointment within 10 days and get a follow-up appointment 10 days later. But what I have heard from all of you is the healthcare plans are pushing back, that DMHC is full of people through a revolving door that are not there to enforce, and that needs to stop. And the governor is already taking actions so that there are electronic records now that are sent to DMHC so that there's more accountability. But the fact of the matter is that what I'm hearing from you is that the health plans are just making it harder and harder, saying, okay, you wanted 221, you need to have 10 patients a day and no time to be able to do the reporting. This is absolutely outrageous. Healthcare, mental health parity is real. And thank you for fighting for it. As governor, I will fight the fight and make sure that we do more for your patients.
Moving on, Betty Yee. Same question.
Thank you. I believe experience matters here. I believe as the former state controller, I'm the only one among the four of us that served on the CalPERS board, vested with the interest of controlling healthcare costs for our public sector workers. And in that capacity, I saw firsthand just how our health plans and HMOs can and do choose the level of care that they want to provide. Tony Soprano would call it wallet legacy. I call it outrageous. And I opposed it then as controller, and I will oppose this practice going forward as governor. You know, as governor, this is what I will do. I will expand the authority of the Inspector General to include coverage of the Department of Managed Healthcare. I will require Department of Managed Healthcare to proactively review the services that are being provided by HMOs, not just when they get a complaint, but proactively. So there's constant review. And I would also look at putting into place meaningful fines and penalties when they are not complying with the law.
Thank you so much. Mr. Thurmond.
The healthcare companies have to have pressure to make them do the right thing. That's why I've been on the phone all weekend with the CEO of Kaiser saying, pay the NUHW members in Southern California a better wage, give them a pension, give them more time to handle the things that they need for their patients. Related to that, to meet the demand and to slow down all the wait time that patients are waiting for, the companies need to hire more mental health clinicians. Right now, I'm offering a $20,000 scholarship for someone who wants to become a mental health clinician. If you know someone, tell them to call me. 1-800, where you at? I'll get them that money so they can come and serve in our communities. Additionally, I've worked very closely with the Secretary of Health and Human Services of our state, and I will never, as governor, appoint anyone as secretary or as the director of the managed care division who has ever worked for a healthcare company to lead it. And you have to put fees and fines on these companies to make them do the right thing, and I will do just that as your governor.
Okay. Thank you so much. All righty, now let's turn our attention to other issues that concern the working people of California. Laurel, start us off.
The minimum wage in California has completely changed in recent years as Governor Newsom and lawmakers have set wages for specific sectors of the workforce, such as the $20 an hour minimum wage for fast food workers and the $25 an hour minimum wage for healthcare workers. Do you think this sector by sector approach is the right way to set wages, or should the state have one overall minimum wage for all workers? And what is the right minimum wage for California? Lieutenant Governor.
Well, let's be clear. We have a massive affordability crisis in the state of California. We had one before COVID, and it is just totally out of control. The way that we handle it is by increasing wages and by delivering more housing. On the wage front, the governor did sign these two, and I think that it was important because healthcare workers are essential workers on the front lines. You all know healthcare workers are not getting paid enough. And fast food workers make up an enormous part of the workforce in our state. Here's what we also know. When wages go up because labor unions have been able to increase wages, they actually go up for everybody. And in those two areas, I think it was very, very important to do it, particularly when prices and affordability has been so difficult. I will say this, the bargaining process is important because the bargaining process is what you do to make sure that it is sector specific to all of you. So I think both are important, but I do support. But I also support the $18 minimum wage.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You're done.
Okay, Senator Atkins, please.
Thank you very much. Look, for 29 years of my life, I had to live on a minimum wage. I think we need a living wage. And California has led the way to raise the minimum wage, but it's not enough. It's not enough. I support that ballot measure as well. But I think, and I agree, healthcare workers lived through a very difficult time during the pandemic. We needed to increase the wage. And look, $25 an hour is also not a living wage here. We have struggles that we need to meet. And there are many other things that we can do, but I believe we have to start by recognizing the work of everyday workers. I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to try to stretch a dollar and make it work. So I absolutely support an increase in the minimum wage. We need to continue to work until we get to a living wage. And for fast food workers, the fight for 15, people said, oh, those are students. No, people are making careers now, because that's what's required here. So I support increasing wages and then doing everything else to make it possible for people to live here.
Thank you.
Betty Yee.
I do support the sectoral setting of minimum wage. Look, every sector has its attributes, certainly different types of workers, different backgrounds, different levels of experience that are required. And so I think we are looking at, frankly, a phase of where we are looking at sectoral bargaining as something that might be in the cards as well for the future. One of the things with raising minimum wages here in California, I don't believe there should be a statewide minimum wage looking at sectors, but we do have an affordability crisis, and we do need to be sure that we are recognizing that workers today are really having a hard time making ends meet, and that what we are doing is just setting them on the path of just being able to just manage day to day. We are not solving their affordability crises. We have to look at the other side of the ledger in terms of how we make housing affordable, how we make healthcare affordable, how we make all these other services that Californians depend on for them and their families, particularly for working people, affordable.
And Superintendent Thurmond?
I'm going to show my age here, but my first job was in fast food. I worked at McDonald's, and they paid me $3.35 an hour, if you can imagine that. I support the minimum wage in the fast food sector that was passed, and I really am angry at the companies that have laid people off saying that they can't afford to pay them decent wages. What they're saying is they don't want to dip into their profit margin. And so they've laid off the lowest wage workers in our state to balance the books on their backs. And we should not allow that to happen. In my role as state superintendent of schools, I sponsored legislation to say that we would increase salaries for teachers and classified staff by the year 2030 by 50%. And until we can get there, I have introduced a plan to allow us to build affordable housing for our workforce, our missing middle, and we're going to build more than 2 million housing units all across the state of California.
Okay, but do you support minimum wages sector by sector?
I think it's worth it to look at the different sectors. I think that our economist team can help us work through ways to determine what those wages are and how to deal with compaction. As you raise wages for frontline workers, you also raise wages for those who are their supervisors, and you create an opportunity for everyone to earn more. This year, I got our governor to sign a law that says...
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay, but you know what? I have to say, I got you beat on the minimum wage. My first job was at Dairy Queen, and $2.15 an hour. Yeah, $2.15.
Touche.
Yeah.
Not,
Okay,
you
no.
get to win. Okay,
No,
but I
we'll
worked
talk
as
about
a
it
waiter.
offline.
I made $2.01 an hour.
We'll take it offline. Okay, Melanie Mason of Politico, you're up again.
Thank you. All of you touched on the affordability crisis. I'd love to put a little bit more meat on that bone. The California exodus narrative has gotten a lot of attention, especially when certain high-profile tech executives make a big stink about leaving the state. This year, California's population actually ticked up for the first time since 2020, but many working and middle-class Californians still have deeply held anxieties about how expensive it is to live here. A UC Berkeley poll found that over half of respondents had difficulty accessing basic needs such as food, water, and employment, and 3/4 said it was difficult to find affordable housing in their area. As governor, what would be your top priority for addressing the high cost of living in the state and ensuring that Californians can continue to live here? Let's start with Senator Atkins.
Well, thank you so much for the question. I think that it is continuing to do what we're doing to build housing in this state. As a city council member, I approved thousands and thousands of units of affordable housing in San Diego. I declared Emergency Housing Day in San Diego in 2006. We didn't pay attention, and 2 decades later, we are further behind. The legislature, as part of the legislature, building affordable housing has been one of my top priorities. I want to continue to implement the policies that we've put in place, legislation that's made it easier to build housing. In addition, when we talk about wages, that's one of the reasons we have to increase the minimum wage in any way that we can, because the cost of living here is difficult. The exodus has become people selling the property and leaving California because they can't afford to live here. So we have to address that through wages, through the cost of water, the cost of electricity, and building housing. There is a lot of work we need to do, and I have been engaged in doing it. I will continue to do that work as governor.
Thank you. Lieutenant Governor.
Well, Toni just said, she put her finger on it. She said that government wasn't paying attention. For 20 years, I worked in housing. And again, we went before city council, we went before supervisors, and we said, listen, we need to build more units. And the pushback against us being able to build housing was enormous. And this went on for 20 years. And we have a shortfall of at least 2.5–3 million units. You're not going to do this overnight. But I think it's time that we have someone in the governor's office who has actually built things. I have built housing communities where 200,000 people now live. I know how to do this. And my number one priority as governor is going to be delivering more housing. But I will also say that in the meantime, because it's going to take time, we only build about 100,000 units a year. We built fewer units this year than last year, in spite of all of these efforts. We have to increase wages because it's exactly right. People are leaving.
Thank you.
People need relief now.
Thank you.
Superintendent Thurmond.
As a city council member, I built thousands of units, but the price has gone up because we have those who are gouging those who can't afford to rent anywhere. And the more profit that people make, the higher the prices are. We have had a lack of supply. California needs to have 2 million units by the year 2030 to keep pace of where we need to go. As we increase our supply, we may see some decrease in the cost, but we have to be mindful about building wages for the people who live in our state. No one should have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. California has sectors where people can make great wages. We have manufacturing that is coming back to California. We have a life sciences sector that did probably $2 trillion in California. We have STEAM jobs that are going unfilled, and we have great health professionals and mental health professionals who have to strike to earn a decent wage. If we put pressure on employers to pay more and we create more housing units, we can support Californians.
Thank you.
And now.
Thank you. Betty Yee.
I do believe we have to prioritize housing as the crux of the affordability problem. When you speak to employers across the state, you would think it would be taxes, but it is housing. Where are their workers going to live? How are they going to attract and keep the talent that they need for their jobs? And housing, let me just say, California has done a lot in the housing space, but it's been start and stop. We need a permanent, steady source of financing for affordable housing here in California. We also need to know that we are building housing that will lend themselves to building healthy, sustainable communities. And by that, I mean, we don't just look at housing, and we should expand zoning, by the way, because a lot of local jurisdictions are just doing zoning just to meet their housing minimums. We should expand the capacity. But when we talk about how do we attract the business incentive, business development to happen in communities, how do we attract infrastructure to be built that will support our communities, how do we look at having safe communities, our personal public safety is protected, we have to broaden the conversation to talk about how do we put our dollars to work to build safe communities around the state.
Thank you.
You good with that?
I'm good with that.
Okay. So before we move on to another topic, I'd like to hear what each candidate plans to do about the unfunded pension crisis in California. Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. So, I used to belong to a union. We've got that going on in journalism. So it's estimated that here in California, the state's pension funds are carrying over $250 billion in unfunded liabilities. And I'm wondering how you suggest that the state fill that massive gap. And I'd like to begin with Kounalakis.
Well, thank you for the question. 2 years ago, we had 2 years of massive budget surpluses, and I was very happy to see the governor prioritize this and pay down some of those unfunded liabilities and obligations. But the key to this is growing the economy, because that's where the money goes into the general fund to make sure that the funds are going to be there as the backup. It is also the case that the pension funds investing here in California, when our economy succeeds, will have the kinds of returns that they need to make sure that the funds are there. One of the things the governor asked me to do when we were both first elected and he swore me in is, as a former U.S. ambassador, he asked me to work on trade issues and foreign direct investment. I have an MBA, I have a background in economics. We need to make sure that California, being the 5th largest economy, will continue to be the 5th largest economy. And I bring that experience to the table because all boats rise.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thurmond.
Thank you.
On the issue of pensions, I would just say that there should be equity in pensions for NUHW members. And you have some members in the state who do not have a pension, and that's what I've said to the CEO of Kaiser. Give all of your members a pension. I serve on the California STIRS Retirement Board for Teachers for hundreds of thousands of members across our state. And our pension is performing well, and we have found ways to guarantee and protect the pensions of our members. History has shown us that whenever there are challenges, I've been a city council member and a school board member where we've had to provide pensions to our members, and history has shown us that whenever California is struggling to manage the pensions of those in the public, that there has to be contributions from the state and from the local municipalities to guarantee the pensions of those in our state. I stand for the right for every person to have a pension, and I will fight till every member of NUHW also has a pension.
Betty Yee.
I've had the honor to serve on both the CalSTRS and the CalPERS boards for the 8 years that I was state controller. Let me just say, Lisa, the figure you cited, a big portion of the unfunded liability is retiree health care. And we're coming back where we started. We have to be sure that healthcare is affordable for everyone, including our retirees. And as a member of those boards, I will say that we have done everything to be sure that we are protecting retirement security for our public sector workforce and our educators, being sure we are making good investments and with companies that actually adhere to the values of treating their employees well, and in turn providing their employees with healthcare and benefits. And so what we are seeing now are strategies that we need to do to be sure that we are not exposing taxpayers to pick up more of the bill. And I believe that Governor Brown started this, Governor Newsom continued this, but our retirees at the state level are prepaying for their health care, so that liability should start to work itself down. But at the same time, we have to be sure that we are able to guarantee that they will have affordable health care at the end of their work life.
Thank you so much. And finally, Toni Atkins.
Thank you very much. Look, I support a defined benefit for all workers because the market can be volatile, and I think you've worked for it, you earn it, so I support a defined benefit. I was the president pro tem of the Senate that worked with the governor to make sure as we got a surplus that we were looking at basics, things that we needed to do, whether it was infrastructure, deferred maintenance, whether it was adding more money to our schools, whether it was tackling the unemployment insurance debt, which is so big, particularly because of the pandemic. We need to put money towards the unfunded liability and pension. And it is true, a big part of that is healthcare costs. So we do have to bring down the cost of healthcare, but we also, when we do have a surplus, and we have a rainy day fund now. I was in the assembly when we created the rainy day fund in 2014 so that our volatile tax system can withstand the booms and busts and that we can use our resources to pay down our debt and at the same time put more money into investments, particularly healthcare, education, and other issues in our state.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Let's now turn our attention to both the high cost of housing, which some of you have addressed a little bit, and the issue of homelessness. Okay, Laurel, it's your turn.
Governor Newsom has made homelessness a top priority and has spent more than $20 billion on the problem. Yet the number of Californians without a place to live has grown, according to the most recent point-in-time count, and the homeless population is now estimated at more than 180,000 people. What would you do about homelessness that Governor Newsom has not already tried? Question is first for Betty Yee.
Thank you, Laurel. You know, we do have a homelessness crisis here in California, and it just speaks to the affordability crisis, really. When you look at who is unsheltered and on our streets today, it is a very complex community. But we can actually intervene with so many of them because many of them just can't pay their rent, or maybe they got behind on paying their utilities. And when we look at issues like that, we can help them be able to avoid homelessness. So I say put more emphasis on how we prevent homelessness to begin with. The recent UCSF study, which actually looked at the causes of homelessness, suggested that for many who are unsheltered, that just some assistance in the range of $5,000 to $10,000 would have helped them get back on their feet so that they can actually be able to make ends meet again. And if you think about the 180,000 times 10,000, that's certainly a lot less than what we have been serving, what we've been putting forth in our budget to serve homelessness. So we have to look at how we prevent homelessness in the first place.
Superintendent?
We have, to put it in context, we have 240,000 homeless students in the state of California. 10,000 of them right now are unaccompanied. And if we don't help them today, they will be homeless today and tomorrow as adults. This year, I sponsored legislation to provide $1,000 to help each one of them, and I'm working on a new proposal that would provide subsidized housing with wraparound supports to make sure they get connected to schools and jobs and training. 40% of those who are unhoused in our state are older Californians. We have failed our elders. We have to provide housing for them. I helped to secure $500 million in tax credits in 2020 and every year since. We can build affordable housing for our elders and then use the $1 billion that you all just gave us by voting for Prop 1 to make sure that we provide housing for veterans, for those who are homeless, for those who have mental health challenges, and those who need substance abuse treatment. I look forward to implementing that as your governor.
Lieutenant Governor.
Well, my son who's here says the housing crisis is really the everything crisis, and it is absolutely contributing to homeless. And I know a lot about housing, but in particular, when it comes to homelessness, what we're seeing right now is encampments are starting to be cleaned up. And we need places for these people who are struggling with mental health issues, struggling with addiction. We need places for them to go, and we need wraparound services. All of this funding has been extraordinary, and we need more accountability to make sure that these dollars are going to the right places to make a difference. I also think that the care courts pilot that the governor is championing is important, because when I talk to families who have family members on the street, if they're over 18, the people who have mental illness can reject help from family members. So I'm encouraged by that. You asked, what would we do that's different? The governor has done a good job pushing for more federal aid. I have been out there campaigning every day for Kamala Harris.
Thank
We need a
you
president
so
in the
much.
White House from California who will make sure that this is a national issue in California so that we fix it with national federal help. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And Senator Atkins.
Thank you. Look, this is a complicated problem. We need more housing. And I've been part of the legislature for 14 years as the speaker, as the president pro tem. I supported SB 2. That was my bill to create a permanent source of funding for housing. We get about $500 million a year. It's not nearly enough. I worked on Home Key, and all of those policies that the governor has put into place, he did that working with the legislature. And as speaker and pro tem, I led the way to make sure those policies were put in place. We need to implement it. It takes more than a year or 2 years, particularly as we come out of a pandemic that exacerbated the problem. We need to stay the course. We need to be intentional about it. And we need to make sure that we support that with Housing First and the support that goes around folks with mental health issues, drug addiction. Those are important programs that we have to do at the very same time that we are building the supply of housing we need. I would stay the course, but make it a #1 priority.
Thank you. Okay, so we got a no on that, so let's move on. The high cost of housing isn't the only issue challenging Californians. Public safety has been a major topic this election season. So, Melanie, you want to take that on?
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. California voters will have the chance to weigh in on criminal justice policy on the November ballot. Proposition 36 would increase the penalties for certain theft and drug offenses. It would mark a significant rollback of criminal justice reform that voters approved 10 years ago. Opponents, including Governor Gavin Newsom, say such a measure would usher in a return to over-incarceration. Yet polls have indicated that this initiative is very popular with the voters. How will you be voting on Prop 36? Superintendent Thurmond, we'll start with you.
So I've used Prop 47 and the savings from keeping people out of jail who have committed minor offenses. I've used those savings to provide $100 million for programs like restorative justice. If we just make sure that our kids learn to read by 3rd grade, we can keep them out of the criminal justice system. We can educate and not incarcerate our kids. Now listen, I get that people are upset and they want accountability, and I support accountability. Trust me, I had 1 car stolen, 2 cars broken into, all right? And I get it. People are having their businesses robbed and their homes broken into. But it is proven just by locking up more people in the state is not going to prevent crime. We have to be smart about how we approach crime. That's why I raised $1 million for a crime prevention program in the city of Oakland, where we provide a paid internship program for young people to learn about STEAM careers, put them on a pathway so they don't have to rob and steal, and they can know that they have the opportunity for good jobs.
But thank you. Just to put a finer point on that, Superintendent, your vote on Prop 36 will be?
Still to be determined. There are aspects of Prop 36 that I think are very clear about creating accountability. The measure that I think that still needs to be resolved is I don't think it's a good idea to put people in jail who have a substance abuse problem.
Okay, so TBD on that one.
That's right.
Lieutenant Governor.
Well, look, you said it. The California voters are very, very frustrated. They're frustrated by what they've seen as a deterioration of public safety. And the fact of the matter is that this initiative is complicated, and it is probably not going to do what people want. And what people want is to end the era of incarceration, but also have our communities be safe. So I haven't decided what I'm going to do on this either. I think I want to keep it a private vote. I think I know where I am. But I will tell you, I think this is out of our hands. It is in the hands of the public who want public safety. But we will probably have to see fixes, because I think that this pendulum is swinging out of control. And I want to say something else. There was a young man who was shot in San Francisco recently, a first-pick draft for the 49ers. He was shot by a 17-year-old kid who tried to steal his watch. That kid did not set out that day to try to kill somebody. He set out to steal something. We have to send the message that it's not okay to steal.
Okay, thank you. Senator
Both
Atkins.
of those lives are ruined.
Senator Atkins, your vote on Prop 36?
Thank you. I also haven't taken a position on it, but I have to say, when you look at the language, I am concerned about how it is written. So likely, I will not support this measure. When you do a ballot measure, it is in stone. The only way you can undo it is to go back to the people to undo it. I believe that the package of retail theft legislation that the legislature put forward and had the support of the retail industry is important to enact and have it really do the job that we need it to do. I do not want the pendulum to swing back and incarcerate more people. We've been there, we've done that, it doesn't work. A minute is not enough time to talk about this issue in depth, so let me just refer you. The LA Times did the best editorial in opposition to this proposition that I've seen, and it covers the issues and concerns about public safety, as well as recreating that pipeline where you put people who should not be in jail in jail. The right people who commit violent crimes need to be in jail. People who have economic... Read the LA editorial.
Thank you. Finally, Betty Yee.
Thank you. I think I speak for all of us up here that as public officials, each of our personal safety is paramount. But I do believe that Prop 36 is wrong-headed, and I will be voting no. And I say this decisively because it is setting up false promises about how we want to deal with the issue of public safety generally. You know, there's been a lot of correlation between Prop 47, which was also approved by the voters several years ago, and Prop 36. I don't believe there's a direct correlation, but what didn't happen after Prop 47? There was no additional funding for mental health services. There was no additional funding for community supervision. There was no additional funding for, any of the supportive services that we needed when we were reducing sentences for those low-level offenders to be released into the community. So I believe we have successful holistic reentry programs that can be helpful here. That's a better investment. This is an economic issue. And for many who are committing crimes, they are doing it because they're just trying to put food on the table for their families. I am voting no.
All righty. Okay. I've got a question. Let's talk reparations. Yeah. There are probably some pretty happy Black Californians out there today, since Gavin Newsom recently signed a formal apology law on reparations. I just want to note that earlier the Newsom administration expressed some concerns with a proposal that would have created an agency to implement reparations programs and help Black families research their family lineage. How would you support the effort in general if you're elected? And if you become governor, would you create an agency to help Black Californians do this? And I'll begin with Thurmond.
As a descendant of slaves, you know damn well I support reparations. Let me be clear on that. We have many Fortune 1000 companies in this nation that benefited off of the backs of slaves. And why shouldn't those Fortune 1000 companies provide some benefit to the descendants of the slaves who made them Fortune 1000 companies? And so most slaves and descendants of slaves don't have the ability to know who their ancestors are. And so why shouldn't we have an agency that allows someone to be able to trace their lineage and their heritage, not just to ask for benefit, but to have the connection of what every American knows, where their great-grandparents came from, where their heritage is based. That's why I helped to pass a law in this state that says we will teach ethnic studies to all of our students, so all California students will know the contributions of their ancestors, and I will support
Thank you so much.
the lineage
Thank you so
history
much.
work.
Betty Yee.
Thank you. First of all, I think the reparations discussion is just needs to continue to be centered. When you look at the history of our country, certainly the history of our state as well, how we have all advanced has been really on the backs of oppressing others. And so in terms of really continuing to shine light on this, I do support the creation of an agency along the same lines of the superintendent's reasoning. However, when I think about reparations, I don't want to think about this as a one-and-done response. This is long-standing discrimination, systemic racism, and when we talk about reparations, I hope we are looking at systemic responses in terms of how we are uplifting our Black community here in California. And economically, I would say, is really the key. So how do we look at being sure that they are really getting the opportunities with respect to affordable housing, with respect to healthcare, all the things that we're talking about here, because that is how we are going to right this injustice.
Thank you so much. Senator Atkins.
Thank you. Well, I was proud to be part of appointing folks to sit on the reparations task force to produce that incredible document. And if you have an opportunity, you should really try to read it. You know, I think part of the reason we need this is because, you know, it's a topic today, but it is systemic. It is ongoing. And I think promises made need to be promises kept. And without the intentionality and the focus on this, I think people are afraid we'll just turn our head next year to whatever the big topic is then. So I think it is important to focus and create a commission. I understand funding is an issue. It always is. But I think if we're going to really tackle the core and the systemic issue that we're dealing with racism, we are going to have something in place whose mandate and responsibility it is to report to the governor and the legislature what we've done. We need to tackle educational issues, housing issues, economic issues.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I think we should.
Kounalakis.
So my family story is very different from the superintendent. My husband's here. 3 out of 4 of our parents came to the United States as refugees, and they were welcomed by this country with open arms. The history of slavery in this country, the conversation is not over. And in our state, we have a history of doing the right thing. I'm a member of the UC Regents, the CSU trustees, and the Community College Board of Trustees. And for as long as I can remember, I have fought for affirmative action. And with it being done away with, we're seeing it's harder than ever for African-American students to have the opportunity for education that they deserve. Systemic racism still exists. I do support the establishment of a new commission, not commission, but part of the administration that deals with this issue. Let me also say there's precedent because we gave reparations to the Japanese, Europe did this after the Second World War for the Jewish community.
Okay,
there's
we got
precedent.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All righty. Let's go back to Laurel to start us off with a round of questions in which we'll ask the candidates to raise their hands in response to questions, and we're going to call on selected candidates to elaborate on their answers. All righty, this is going to be fun. I just want to say it again so everybody understands what we're doing here. We're going to go back to Laurel, okay? She's going to start us off with a round of questions in which we'll ask the candidates. So candidates, you got me? You got me? Okay, all righty. We'll ask the candidates to raise their hands in response to questions, and we're going to call on selected candidates, which means our choice, to elaborate on their answers. This is going to be fun. Laurel, kick it off.
Okay. We'll begin with a very serious topic here. The death penalty is legal in California, and voters have repeatedly upheld it as an acceptable punishment for the most heinous crimes. But Governor Newsom put a moratorium on capital punishment as one of his first acts as governor. Please raise your hand if you would reinstate the death penalty.
Wow.
And Lieutenant Governor, can you explain your position, please?
Well, thank you. So as Lieutenant Governor, I have the opportunity of working with the governor on a lot of things. And when he signed that executive order, it was just a few months into his first term. And he called me and asked me to be there with him and stand by his side, because if the governor leaves the state, the duties and responsibilities fall to the lieutenant governor. And I wanted to be absolutely clear that if he was out of state and under the provisions of the Constitution, that the lieutenant governor was absolutely by his side. But this is something since I was a teenager that I haven't understood. How can we give government the ability to kill its citizens under any circumstances? I am fiercely against the death penalty in this state and in the country. Thank you.
Okay. And Betty Yee, could you explain your position, and particularly in relation to the fact that voters have repeatedly expressed support for having the death penalty in California?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think any one inmate who has been wrongfully convicted and been sentenced to the death penalty is one too many. And let's face it, our criminal justice system has really been a part of our system of systemic racism, where many of our Black and brown people are facing, their consequences for crimes committed. And I do think there are many in the criminal justice arena now who support just other measures besides the death penalty for meeting their consequences.
Superintendent?
I stood with Governor Newsom when he made the announcement, and I stand firmly against the death penalty. How many people have been sent to their death who, after the fact, have been proven innocent of their accused crimes? Why aren't we putting more focus on reentry programs? It's proven when you bring college courses into a prison that those folks are less likely to reoffend. It is cheaper, and the death penalty is not proven to be a deterrent. So let us do what other civilized nations in the world do. They make sure kids get preschool and stay out of jail, and programs for reentry programs in our state.
And Senator Atkins.
Well, thank you. I stood with Gavin Newsom that day also. What an incredible, courageous stand to take in light of citizens voting the other way. I applaud him for that. I've never supported the death penalty. I agree with what my colleagues have said here. And I hearken back to a song by Holly Near. Why do we kill people who are killing people to prove that killing people is wrong? What a foolish notion. Until we get our restorative justice system the way it should be, I can never support this.
All of you have endorsed Kamala Harris for president. Yeah. If she wins, she may be looking to her fellow Californians to come work for her. Raise your hand if you commit to staying in this race for governor if she wins, even if she offers you a post in her administration. Okay, so that's all four still in no matter what. So I'm going to gut check with a couple of folks here. Superintendent Thurmond, the president-elect comes calling and says that she wants you for administration. Why would you turn that down?
I'll just say that during the pandemic, I was asked to become Secretary of Education, and I said no to help our 6 million students in the great state of California. I belong in California, I'm gonna stay in California, and I'm gonna be fighting for Californians, even when we get my mentor and friend, Vice President Harris, elected to be the first president of California as a woman of color from California.
Lieutenant Governor, you go way back, and you've also served in an administration, so why not take the opportunity again?
I think we need to be really clear. I was with the vice president yesterday. This is going to be a very close election, and I want to thank in advance all the members of NUHW for your organizing, phone banking, postcard writing. We cannot let that other guy back in. Devastating consequences for our state. So, God willing, she wins this, and we get through it, and she takes that oath of office. I started running for governor a year and a half ago, and I have a lot of people who've supported me along the way. I wouldn't be running if I didn't think I was the right person for this job at the right time. So I'm in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Laurel, you can ask another one.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We'll move on to the next question.
Okay. During the COVID-19 pandemic, California allowed school districts to determine when they reopened, which led to great inequities across the state. Students in urban districts were out of school for months longer than kids in other areas. And we've seen the consequences with test scores and academic performance. Raise your hand if you're governor, raise your hand if you would take a different approach.
Take it. I don't understand the question.
Take a different approach. Instead of allowing individual districts to decide when to reopen, there could have been a different approach.
I'll allow you. How about repeating the entire question?
Sorry.
Sure. Yeah. During the COVID-19 pandemic, California allowed local school districts to determine when they reopened their schools. That led to great inequities across the state, with students in urban districts being out of school longer than kids in other areas, months longer. Raise your hand if you, as governor, would take a different approach. Okay, we'll go down the order here, starting with Betty Yee, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think the approach, obviously the pandemic created all kinds of new experiences for everyone involved. But I think the state has a responsibility of setting expectations about how we continue to serve our learners throughout the state. I believe that the state should have taken a stronger stance in terms of setting those expectations. And if districts weren't able to meet them, that we would be engaged with them about how to be sure that they are met. The learning loss is real, what we're finding, particularly in our urban districts. And so I always want to be sure that we are supporting our learners first and how we can continue to make sure they develop.
Okay, and Superintendent.
So first, I would commend the governor for being a Herculean leader in a public health crisis that we've never seen before. And 1 million people lost their lives. And the governor has taken incredible leadership to provide the kind of supports that we've needed. The one thing that I would do differently is the package that was provided for schools to get funding to get open was based on a kind of a point system. And I would have just said, here's it is, take it or leave it, we need you open. But I, again, commend him for his courageous work and the work that we're doing to help our kids bounce back from this once-in-a-lifetime pandemic.
Lieutenant Governor.
So again, we're with healthcare workers. Thank you for all of your service and sacrifice and what you did during the COVID pandemic. You were on the front lines. The reason I didn't hear your question, Laurel, is because I was thinking about that time. The only time I cried during the COVID pandemic was when I heard that kids in K-12 are not going back to school, when kids in a lot of private schools were. My children at the time were in a Catholic school, and that school was going back into classes, and they were able to continue their studies in person. The state should have stepped in to do more, but I also commend Toni Thurmond for keeping our teachers safe, and I think that was a very important consideration as well.
And Senator Atkins, you did not raise your hand, so I think you supported the way the state handled it. Is that what you meant?
Well, I'm sort of a But I just have to say, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback now. It was a very difficult time. And I talked to teachers, and I was with the governor when he had to make those decisions. And then we saw the aftermath of having to figure out how to make up for learning loss. Look, until that hits your desk at 4 o'clock on Tuesday evening, I'm not sure you know how you're gonna deal with the situation. We know more today than we knew then. I'm gonna have to know what's going on the ground and make that decision with the best information I have at the time.
Thank you.
Labor unions have repeatedly sought a bill that would give unemployment insurance to workers that go on strike. It's a crowd pleaser in this room, but Governor Newsom vetoed that measure last year. And a similar measure failed to even reach his desk this year. So please raise your hands if you would sign a bill that would give unemployment insurance to striking workers. Senator Atkins, we'll start with you. Why was Governor Newsom wrong?
Well, I think Governor Newsom was probably looking at the state of our budget at the moment. I think it's only right that workers are compensated. They pay into uninsurance themselves. Their employers pay into it. If they are working to make sure that they have rights, I think it's only fair. I mean, you don't just decide one morning, I think I'll strike. A lot has happened to put you in that position. I think we should pay striking workers unemployment.
Lieutenant Governor, was the governor wrong about the budget constraints?
Again, I think that he was responding to the budget, but I will say I support this because it's $450 a week. That is not going to keep people from wanting to get back to work. And the fact of the matter is your managers are getting paid. Why shouldn't you be getting paid?
Mr. Thurmond.
To be clear, I was proud to sponsor the bill to provide that benefit to our workers. So I think you know that I would sign it. You know, I was on my first strike line at the age of 18 as a freshman in college. My cousin who raised me was a shop steward in her union. And I happened to attend the university where she worked. On my first day on the university campus, I never made it to my class because I was on the strike line. And I believe in the right to organize and to fight. People don't make decisions to strike lightly. They make sacrifices that allow us to have benefits, and they should have the same support from us, and I would sign it.
Betty, you also said you would sign that bill. Why?
I would have signed the bill, but I would have gone further. We need to reform the UI fund, frankly, to look at recognizing the economy that we're in now and building it as a worker resilience fund. Because we are going to see workers continue to meet and to try to chase the wages that they should be earning. And if they're trying to upskill, if they're trying to look for a better job, we should support them in that effort so they're not set back in terms of their earning potential.
Thank you.
California has plans to phase out brand new gas-powered cars in 2035. If one of you are elected governor and you serve for 2 terms, you will be in charge of implementing this should you choose to stick with the plan. So the question is, please raise your hand if you plan to stick with this, with the phase out of gas-powered cars should you be elected governor. Okay, everyone's on the same page. Senator Atkins, can you please explain your position and what you would do with the implementation?
Thank you. I do believe very much in this because we in California have set very aggressive goals, and it's for climate. You remember, many of you may remember, there's some folks in here from Los Angeles. Remember, you couldn't see the skyline in the mid-'80s? That is the result of the work that California getting permission from the federal government to set our own EPA standards here in this state. I do support it. I do, however, think we need to be cognizant of what it takes for that transition to happen and evaluate some of those rules in terms of by when diesel trucks, for example, or trucks have to transition. I think this is a much deeper conversation, but yes, I do support these goals.
Betty Yee?
I support it, but I also believe we need more transparency about how this transition will occur. There will be costs incurred, and there will be other parts of the economy that will be affected. We haven't even talked to car dealerships and car rental agencies and just all of the folks in our economy that are going to be affected by this. But I intend to continue to meet that mandate, but also be very transparent to be sure that we're not leaving those who are contributing to the economy today behind in terms of their ability to continue to do so.
Thanks.
Superintendent.
I support the goals. Climate change is real. You don't have to be a scientist to figure that out. Just look outside your window and see the swings in temperature, the rising sea level that we are experiencing. We must all be stewards of the environment so we create a great future for our young people. In my time in the legislature, I've passed bills that capped idle oil wells and put big fees and fines on those who hurt our environment. It's because I live in the stone's throw of an environment that has had a major fire and sent thousands of people to the hospital. We must do this for environmental justice for all Californians.
And Lieutenant Governor.
California is the leader in the world in combating climate change, and I'm going to continue to make sure that that is the case if I'm governor. I have worked to reduce the amount of offshore drilling off of the coast of California. And look, you're healthcare workers. People need clean water and clean air. And we know that these wildfires and the droughts and the extreme weather that are experienced are coming from the changes in man-made activity. We need to fulfill our 2045 goals. And I want to say something else, this is an economic issue. The jobs that will come from this transition will ensure that California will be the fifth largest, fourth largest economy, and on and on.
All right, we're hearing you. Wow, that was a fun round. We covered a lot of ground, right? Everybody happy with that? Okay, now, NUHW. The candidates are now going to get one more chance to speak directly to you and ask for your vote. Each gets 2 minutes for closing remarks, and we're serious about the 2 minutes this time, people. Okay? So we're going to begin with Toni Atkins, 2 minutes.
Lisa, thank you. Thank you, NUHW, for hosting this forum today. You know, California is an incredible place with so much to be proud of. I believe in the California dream. That dream gave me the path to the middle class that I never imagined as a poor kid from Appalachia. I want that to be the reality for everyone. Today, we have challenges that need to be met if we are to stay that place of dreams and opportunity. I've spent almost 40 years in service in California as a clinic director, a city council member in San Diego, an acting mayor, assembly member and speaker, senator and president pro tem of the Senate. I am tried and tested with a proven record of accomplishments on all of these issues that we've discussed today and more. And I will be able to hit the ground running day one. I'm the most experienced and qualified candidate for governor. Despite everything working against me that I've had to personally overcome, I have never, ever given up, and I will never, ever give up on California. In 2026, we have a chance to elect a governor who understands what it's like to struggle to get by and to try to get ahead. We have the chance to elect a governor who shows up and steps up every single day, just like each of you do. I look forward to that opportunity, and I think we would make a great team. Thank you.
Thank you. Eleni Kounalakis.
Well, let me just say, I don't think it's right for any one of us to claim to be more experienced. That we all have different experiences, and I have great respect for the people who are up here. But you might wonder, how did I get here? How did a person who had 20 years building housing communities end up running for governor? The fact is that I was in the Obama administration, I worked as a diplomat, and then Donald Trump won, and I ran for lieutenant governor, and I won because NUHW believed in me and was the first union to stand by me in my bid. And as lieutenant governor, I have worked hard for the people of this state, for women, for women's reproductive rights. We changed the California Constitution, and I worked very hard on that to enshrine a woman's right to choose. But I really believe more than anything else, We have a massive affordability crisis in this state. It is hitting everybody. It's gotten worse since COVID. We've heard all kinds of talk about housing, but the fact is we're building less today than we were building last year. I am a builder. I know how to do this and provide the water and the infrastructure and the roadways and everything we're going to need to do in order to build a future where people can afford a home. That is my vision for the future of this state. So I want to, again, thank everyone here at NUHW. I have learned so much from you over the last 6 years. I've been out on the picket lines with you. I've worked on legislation with you. I've worked with you when it came to issues at the University of California. And I will continue to stand with you. And if I am elected governor, we will continue to fight the fight for mental health parity and for fair wages for all of you so that you can do what I hear all the time, which is make sure that your job works for you so that you can serve the vulnerable people who you help every day in the hospitals and in their homes and across the state. Thank you.
Toni Thurmond.
Thank you, Lisa, Melanie, and Laurel. Thank you to the participants. Thank you to everyone at NUHW. You're looking at a 56-year-old father of 2 young daughters who are going to get to vote for Kamala Harris to be the next president of this great country. You know I'm not going to fight for the millionaires and the billionaires because of the way I was raised. In addition to my professional experience, my life experience is different than anything you're going to hear. I lost my only parent to cancer when I was 6 years old, my mom, who was a teacher in San Jose. My dad was a Vietnam vet who didn't come home from the war. You all know about trauma. He talked about his trauma when I found him on the internet as a 40-year-old man. When my mom lost her battle, her 4 kids got split up. I ended up with a cousin in Philadelphia who I never knew until I showed up on her doorstep. I grew up on every form of public assistance you can imagine. The free lunch program, food stamps, and a whole lot of government cheese. And I sure hope you didn't have any government cheese in your meal today. These programs helped my family to overcome poverty and to get an education and to become a social worker and to work in school-based mental health and with foster youth and with individuals with developmental disabilities and with seniors. And I parlayed that experience into 16 years of elected officials that brings me to my vision of building 2 million housing units for Californians by building housing for the homeless with wraparound supports and making sure that everyone has a great job. If you want to know if I'm someone who can stand up to Kaiser and to other healthcare corporations, just know that I made the internet service providers give our kids free computers and internet for $15 a month. And when they tried to pass forced outings against the LGBTQ plus kids in our state, I said, this is California. We don't ban books and we don't do forcible outings of our kids. We support them and we love on them. And that's the kind of governor I will be, and stand up for your rights and stand up for the mental health needs of patients in the great state of California. Please join California NAACP and 300 election endorsers who've endorsed my campaign.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And finally, Betty Yee.
Thank you, NUHW members up and down the state, for this opportunity. I want to thank my fellow candidates here. Obviously, we have a lot in common, but I also want to just point out just some differences. I've been doing public service for almost 40 years, and I will say that I do it because I'm a problem solver. It's great that we all have the same positions on many, many issues, and I'm grateful for that because we share values. But at the same time, who can deliver? And every issue we've talked about today is about how we build capacity. How do we build capacity to serve those most in need? And that's what you're all fighting for, and that's what you're all experiencing today, particularly with our mental health crisis. And so I'm not shy in taking on big interests. You know, as your state controller, when I was on the Victims' Compensation Board, we knew that emergency trauma centers were one of the best ways for many of our underserved communities to be served. And yet, all of those centers were in Southern California, not a one in the Central Valley to help our migrant workers. And so I fought some of the strongest Southern California politicians and got an emergency resource treatment center opened in the Central Valley, and we are now able to serve them, and they're equitably being treated. Also, you know, when I think about all of the issues that we have talked about today, execution matters, details matter, which is why I'm going to continue to give my sharp focus and eye on how we are going to execute and be successful in having single-payer health care here in California that doesn't create a burden for all of you as working Californians, as those trying to stay in the middle class, because this is real. The trade-offs are real, and I will be giving a sharp eye to that. And finally, let me just say, I've been proud to stand with you. There's something on your website that I always take to, and that is someone holding a sign with a quote from former CEO, the late CEO of Kaiser Healthcare, Bernard J. Tyson. And he said, "Do not ask permission to be able to improve the lives of the individuals and communities that we have pledged to serve." My willingness to serve is unwavering. This is why I'm running.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to take the time to thank all of the candidates. Man, this has been fun. I also want to thank the journalists here, Melanie and Laurel. Thank you so much for your time today. And to everyone who took part in this civic exercise. I also want to give a special shout out to the LA Times for joining NUHW members here in San Francisco and those watching online. So my job on the stage is done. Yeah, I know, bummer, right? But we're not quite finished. NUHW President Sofia Mendoza has an important message and a little bit of business that she needs to complete before we wrap. Sofia, the stage is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Melanie and Laurel. Let's have a round of applause for our moderator and our panel of journalists. And let's hear it for all 4 candidates who participated today. NUHW is proudly a very democratic union. Immediately following our most recent candidate forum for U.S. Senate, NUHW members who were in the audience and watching online voted to decide our union's endorsement. That vote was binding, and the winner received NUHW's full and official endorsement, financial support, and campaign assistance. This time, we're doing things a little bit differently. It's too early to make an official endorsement. This year, we are conducting a non-binding straw poll. If you are an NUHW leader here at our leadership conference, or if you are an NUHW member watching remotely who registered to participate in the straw poll, you will very soon be receiving your ballot via text. When you receive your text, click on the link, be patient. It might take a minute for the ballot to load. Give it time, but cast your ballot right away. Voting will close today at 2 p.m., and we will share the results with news organizations later today and on the NUHW website. Next year, NUHW will be holding another candidate forum for those seeking to be California's next governor. That forum will be held at our leadership conference in LA on the morning of September 28th, 2025. Following that forum, NUHW members will take a binding vote on which candidate to endorse. This ends this year's leadership conference. It was good to see everyone. Everybody, please have a safe trip home and see you all next year in LA.